Okay, we're continuing chapter something. You know her, he said. He picked up his pipe and loaded it with cherry sweet tobacco. He always did this when settling in for a long lecture or conversation. Good question. He lit the pipe. Let's say she's been on this porch here quite a few times. White smoke puffed like Apache signals from the corner of his mouth. I was wondering when you'd start asking questions. He chuckled to himself. Bafflement. Good word. She is different, isn't she? Kevin and I burst into laughter and nods. At that moment, I realized how much I've been craving Archie's confirmation. Kevin explained, like she's some other species. Archie cocked his head as if he just caught the sound of a rare bird. The pipe stem anchored a wiry grin. A sweet scent filled the air above our rocking chairs. He stared at Kevin. On the contrary, she's one of us. Most decidedly. She's us more than we are. She is, I think, who we really are, or were. Archie talked like that sometimes, in riddles. We didn't always know what he was saying, but our ears didn't much care. We just wanted to hear more. As the sun dipped below the mountains, he fired a final dart at Archie's flashing eyebrows. Oh, excuse me, it fired a final dart at Archie's flash. Blah, blah, blah. She's homeschooled, you know. Her mother brought her to me. I guess she wanted a break from playing teacher. 1 day a week. 4, 5, yes, 5 years now. Kevin pointed. You created her. Archie smiled, puffed. Nope, that was done long before me. Some people were saying she's some kind of alien sent down from Alpha Centuria or something, said Kevin. He chuckled, but not too convincingly. He half believed it himself. Archie's pipe had gone out. He relit it. She's anything, but she's an earthling if ever there was one. So it's not an act? Asked Kevin. An act? No, if anything, it's us who is acting. She's as real as. He looked around. He picked up the tiny wedge-like skull of Barney, a 60-million-year-old Polynesian rodent, and held it up. As real as Barney. I felt a little jolt of pride as having reached this conclusion myself. But the name, said Kevin, leaning forward, is it real? The name? Archie shrugged. Every name is real. That's the nature of names. When she first showed up, she called herself Pocket Mouse. Then Mud Pie, then what? Hully Gully, I believe. Now, Star Girl. The word came out whispery. My throat was dry. Archie looked at me. Whatever strikes your fancy. Maybe. That's how names ought to be, eh? Why be stuck with just one your whole life? What about her parents? Said Kevin. What about them? What do they think? Archie shrugged. I guess they agree. What do they do? Kevin asked. Breathe, eat, clip their toenails, said Archie. And Kevin laughed. You know what I mean. Where do they work? Mrs. Carraway, until a few months ago, was Stargirl's teacher. I understand now she makes costumes for movies. Archie poked me. The crazy clothes. Her father, Charles, works, where else? Mechatronics, we said in chorus. I said it with a wonder, for I imagined something more exotic. Kevin smiled. So, where's she from? A natural question in a city as young as Micah. Nearly everybody had been born somewhere else. Archie's eyebrows went up. Good question. He took a long pull of his pipe. Some would say Minnesota, but in her case... He let out the smoke, his face disappearing in a gray cloud. A sweet haze veiled the sunset, cherries roasting in the maricopas. He whispered, Rara avis. Archie, said Kevin, you're not making a lot of sense. Archie laughed. Do I ever? And Kevin jumped up. I want to put on a hot seat. Dorco Borlorco here doesn't want to. And Archie studied me through the smoke. I thought I saw approval, but when he spoke, he merely said, Work it out between yourselves, men. We talked until dark. We said adios to Senor Cigarro. On our way out, Archie said more to me than to Kevin, I thought. You'll know her more by your questions than by her answers. Keep looking at her long enough. One day you might see someone you know. Chapter 8. The change began around Thanksgiving. By December 1st, Stargirl Carraway had become the most popular person in school. How did this happen? Was it the cheerleading? The last football game of the season was hers first as a cheerleader. The grandstands was packed. Students, parents, alumni. Never had so many people come to a football game to see a cheerleader. She did all the regular cheers and routines and more. In fact, she never stopped cheering. While the other girls were taking breaks. Oh my gosh, my phone! There we go. In fact, she never stopped cheering. While the other girls were taking breaks, she went on jumping and yelling. She roamed. Areas that had always been ignored, the far end of the grandstand, the spectators behind the goalposts, the snack bar parents, found themselves with their own arm-pumping cheerleader. She ran straight across the 50-yard line and joined the other team's cheerleaders. We laughed as they stood there with their mouths open. She cheered in front of the players' benches. We shooed away by the coach. At halftime, she played her ukulele with the band. The second half, she got acrobatic. She did cartwheels and backflips. At one point, the game was stopped and 3 zebra-shirted officials ran towards one end zone. She had shimmied up the goalpost, tight-roped across it to the middle of the crossbar, was now standing there with her arms raised in a touchdown sign. She was commanded down to a standing ovation and flashing cameras. As we found out afterwards, no one mentioned how boring the game itself was. No one cared that the electronics had lost again. In his column next day, the sports editor of the Micah Times referred to her as the best athlete on the field. We couldn't wait for basketball season. Was it a Hillary Kimball backlash? Several days after the birthday song, I heard a shout down the hallway. Don't! I ran. A crowd was gathered at the top of the stairwell. They were all staring at something. I pushed my way through. Hillary Kimball was standing at the upper landing, grinning. She was holding Cinnamon, the rat, dangling it by its tail over the railing, nothing but space between it and the first floor. Stargirl was on the steps below, looking up. The scene froze. The bell for the next class rang. Nobody moved. Stargirl said nothing, merely looked. The 8 toes of Cinnamon's front paws splayed apart. Its tiny, unblinking eyes were bulging, black as cloves. Again a voice rang out, "Don't, Hillary!" Suddenly, Hillary dropped it. Someone screamed, but the rat fell only to the floor at Hillary's feet. She sent Stargirl a final sneer and left. Was it Dory Dilson? Dory Dilson was a brown-haired 9th grader who wrote poems in a loose-leaf notebook half as big as herself, and whose name nobody knew until the day she sat down at Stargirl's table for lunch. Next day, the table was full. No longer did Stargirl eat lunch or walk in the hallways or do anything else at school alone. Was it us? Did we change? Why didn't Hillary Kimball drop the rat to its death? Did she see something in our eyes? Whatever the reason, by the time we returned from Thanksgiving break, it was clear that the change had occurred. Suddenly, Stargirl was not dangerous. We rushed to embrace her. Calls of "Stargirl" flew across the hallway. We couldn't say her name often enough. It tickled us to mention her name to strangers and watch the expression on their faces. Girls liked her, boys liked her, and, most remarkably, the attention came from all kinds of kids, shy mice and princesses, jocks and eggheads. We honored her by imitation. A chorus of ukuleles strummed in the lunchroom. Flowers appeared on classroom desks. One day it rained and a dozen girls ran outside to dance. The pet shop at Micah Mall ran out of rats. The best chance for us to express our admiration came in the first week of December. We were gathered in the auditorium for the annual oratorical contest, sponsored by the Arizona League of Women Voters. The event was open to any high school student who cared to show off his or her stuff as a public speaker. The microphone was yours for 7 minutes. Talk about anything you like. The winner would move on to the district competition. Usually only 4 or 5 students entered this contest at MAHS. That year there were 13, including Stargirl. You didn't have to be a judge to see that she was far and away the best. She gave an animated speech, a performance really titled "Elf Owl, Call Me by My First Name." Her gray-brown homesteader's dress was the color of her subject. I couldn't see her freckles from the audience, but I imagined them dancing on her nose as she flicked her head this way and that. When she finished, we stomped the floor and whistled and shouted for more. While the judges went back through the charade of conferring, a film was shown. It was a brief documentary about the previous year's state finals. It featured the winner, a boy from Yuma. The most riveting moment of the film came not during the contest, but during its aftermath, when the boy arrived back at Yuma High. The whole school mobbed him in the parking lot. Banners, cheerleaders, band music, confetti, streamers, popping their arms in the air, returning hero rode the shoulders into school. The film ended, the lights went back on, and the judges proclaimed Stargirl the winner. She would now go on to the district competition in Red Rock, they said. The state finals would be held in Phoenix in April. And again we whooped and whistled. Such was the acclamation we gave her in those last weeks of the year. But we also gave her something of ourselves. Okay, that was the end.